Hey everyone, Hani from Critical Faculty here, and today we are going to talk about belief without evidence. And I've got just the right person to talk about that with me is my friend Derek Lambert. How are you, Derek?
Hey, what's up, brother?
I'm loving that new camera angle. It looks so
Thank you.
professional and so interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Before we get deep into today's topic, um, do you want to just, it's a brand new year, 2023. MythVision, over the last 2, 3 years, I've watched it grow and get bigger and bigger and get very educational. Do you want to share with us few things that you might be doing in this year?
Tons and tons of college-ish level courses will be accessible for a much more general audience. So it's as if you literally took the courses with academics in many of these institutions, so to speak, and we're making it popular. We're going to be making it affordable and getting it out there. It also will help the academic themselves because they're going to be, when the people purchase the course, it helps the scholar. And I think everything's heading this way anyway, where everything's going to be online. And a lot of people are going to probably not even appear in universities anymore at some point. You know, everything's becoming through the computer, stuff like that. But we're ahead of the game and we're trying to educate people. And it's going to be on all sorts of different topics. So even this year, I'm doing sex and evolution, which is outside of just biblical. We're doing, of course, plenty of Bible stuff, Hebrew Bible, ancient Israelite religion, New Testament, Gospels, Paul, the history of New Testament research and how that's worked out throughout history. And eventually, who knows? I'm hoping to do Islam. I'm hoping to get into various religions and, of course, science. I want to do more science. I think you and me have a lot of overlap in terms of our enjoyment of science, which
Yes.
I think today is going to be we're going to be dealing with some of this stuff pertaining to faith and science and knowledge, things like that. So yeah. There's just going to be a lot of that. And of course, I've just stepped up my quality in what I edit and my videos and stuff like that. So lots of interviews, lots of work, lots of
See
scholarship.
that? People have to start buying that 4K TV to start watching your contents properly.
Right. Exactly. Keep up with me by buying a better flat screen.
Considering that 8K is pretty much going to be the mainstream
Well, my
a couple
camera
of years time.
not this camera that I'm using. This is a DSLR. The webcam is a DSLR. But the other camera I have is actually the Canon R5C, and it does shoot 8K.
Yeah.
But I don't shoot 8K because you know how much my computer can't handle 4K right. So I barely make it with 4K in terms of editing this stuff.
And there is much of a point because I don't think 8K is available on YouTube anyway, and most people don't have the equipment for it, so it's just going to go to waste.
It eventually will probably become a thing, like you said. You know.
Yeah. I remember when we moved from 720p to full HD, and I was, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a different world.
Eventually, you'll be reaching out and going, Derek, I could feel you.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, I'm interviewing. Quit bothering me. You're touching my face.
TVs will be more high definition than real life eventually.
Yeah.
Right. Believing things without evidence. I mean, a lot of people, and especially the faithful ones, would go, no. You got it wrong. We've got evidence for what we believe. We call it faith because it's like it's a religious word, and it means that you're in a vow with this particular entity. But there are evidence, and this is what you and I were going to argue today. Is it really that's the definition? I don't think it's a definition, because if faith is believing with evidence, why is it then called faith and not called knowledge or information?
Oh, well, I put something together, like a short little sweet little something here. Faith and knowledge are like oil and water. They just don't mix. Faith is like believing in the tooth fairy, while knowledge is like believing in the laws of physics. Faith is blind, while knowledge is 20/20. One is based on feelings, while the other is based on facts. In short, faith is believing in what you hope to be true, while knowledge is knowing what is actually true. And I would say what is actually true based on senses, experience, and even your awareness of certain things. But the faith definition, I think the best place to start is just to open your Bible. So can I share my screen?
Yeah, please.
Okay, we're doing Bible study here. Let me do this here. Share screen, present. I wish I had I don't have time to usually put together beautiful stuff like you do. But anybody can go to Google, type in Hebrews 11, faith in action is the subtitle of this one, but of course. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. By faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, there was no evidence like, hey, look, Abel, look, if you bring me an actual burnt offering and not these vegetables, how did he know, right? It's some almost sixth sense is the expectation of what faith means. It's really an experience or a feeling. It appears the way that it's described, but much of this is mythological. So anyway, by faith, Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings, and by faith, Abel still speaks, even though he is dead. By faith, Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God, and without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So this is the whole idea of faith and works, just giving people an idea. Faith, works will come if you have faith, period, point blank. There's no other way to put this around. But ultimately, in these cases, when you hear like by faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive. So there's no evidence that these conclusions are going to be, but they trust in God. They have faith that this is going to happen. They're hoping that it's going to take place. There is no evidence that it's going to take place. That's why they get rewarded. That's why they end up in this Hall of Fame list. Because according to them, when they were told, hey, Abraham, go to this land where I will send you, and you will be a father of many nations, which is a myth, by the way. But nonetheless, the narrative paints it like this, and people, hey, this is an ancient story that we're telling ourselves, and we believe it. Well, in that story, the point is, Abraham had no evidence that he was really going to be a father of many nations, even when he went and God told him in the story, when he went, what happens? He still doesn't think, there's moments where he doubts God. In fact, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now just so that we can be on the screen. In fact, that's the point of the stories that you find over and over. He goes to Egypt. He's terrified. Remember, God promised him back in the story. He's terrified. What does he do? He pretends that his wife is his sister because he thought they would kill him because she was hot. She was beautiful. So he doesn't trust God. But then he's still, around. And finally, he's faithful. That's why James makes the big deal out of it in the idea of him going and sacrificing Isaac in the New Testament. The whole point was finally when he goes to be willing to kill his own son, what a horrible scene, but he goes willing to kill his son. Then God goes, okay, now I know you trust me. Now I know after all this I put you through, now I know that you trust me. And it's like, whoa, dude, you didn't have any evidence that God actually was looking out for you. But in the end, he ends up in the Hall of Fame saying, oh, this guy's a great guy of faith, So there wasn't the evidence there. It's this trusting in something and hoping that it's going to be true, but it may or may not be. And you're just wishful thinking at the end. That is not a path to knowledge. You can live your life and learn from experience. You could look back and go, damn, I shouldn't have done that many drugs. Oh, I shouldn't have done that to that person. I shouldn't have hurt that person. I shouldn't have stole, whatever. You learn these things from experience, which then you actually have some way, if you will, to test and experience and say, hey, hold on, if I did this and do that, you can almost calculate or measure these things and be able to see the conclusion. Faith is saying, before anything even happens, I'm having hope that something that's contrary to the evidence. Abraham couldn't have kids. He was out of age. His wife couldn't have kids. They were out of age. But God says you're going to have kids. Oh my gosh. Contrary to the evidence you want me to believe, that's faith. Whereas knowledge is based on the evidence, based on the facts, based on the data. This is a good epistemology to have, not faith. There's
a comment here saying if you could collaborate with Hamid Abdul Samad, which is the gentleman I told you about, and you already have a conversation going.
Absolutely.
That's the Muslim scholar that I told you about. He's pretty much killing it in our region because he is approaching the critique of Islam from an academic and scholarly point of view. He teaches in Germany, and he just finished a book called the Real History of Islam. So I think you might want to have a conversation with him. He's a very interesting dude to speak with. Well, it seems that the faith game is not even fair or even, because even prophets or saints are given more evidence than your regular person.
Right.
So Paul gets the road to Damascus. Saint Thomas, the patron saint of skeptics, when confronted by Jesus, he did not recognize when he first saw him. He's like, "Who are you?" And then, okay, well, if you don't believe me, please put your fingers in the holes. And he's given another chance at probing God. Right. Yet we are being told in the 21st century, sorry, you have no access to these extra validations, and you're on your own, you on your heart. Why certain people, even in the Quranic, some Quranic verses shows Abraham. It's actually not. It doesn't show in the Bible, but Abraham is talking to God. Like Abraham is his mate. He's right. Talking to him on a daily basis, and suddenly he goes, "I really can you show me more evidence so I can really, really believe that you're really here?" And so, get some birds, tear them apart, and we'll put them back together as evidence that I'm the true one and true God. And so that's a prophet of God talking to him daily wants extra evidence, and he's been given that evidence. But you and I, who struggled with faith and asked for signs, we don't get one.
This is a great point. In fact, just thinking about it and the way that you just drew that picture, I'm almost convinced that faith is weaponized in a way as a psychological tool by the faithful, those within their thinking, within the group, to persuade people who don't have evidence to stick around and to keep it. Even the account you brought up, Doubting Thomas, I've brought this up before. Notice something. I literally feel like the Gospel of Thomas breaks the fourth wall. And for those who don't know what I mean by the fourth wall, the author is speaking, Jesus is speaking to you, the reader. So in the Gospel of Thomas, when he is speaking to Thomas and he says, "Fill my sides," because Thomas didn't believe. And then all of a sudden he pops up and he's like, "Fill my sides. And now you believe," right? I honestly feel like, imagine I'm looking at Thomas and he's going, "Thomas, feel my side, feel my hands. You feel that? Okay. You believe." And then it's almost like whoever wrote this passage, Jesus turns and goes, "But blessed are you who don't believe or who don't see yet still believe." And he's like breaking the fourth wall through the book to talk to you. And it's actually a tool to convince people who doubt within their own self about those doubts, to suppress those doubts, even though the evidence says it's not true. It's not going to happen.
It's like you get some bonus points. Like it's like, here, don't worry, you get some bonus points for believing and not seeing.
Look at it like this too. Look at the track record historically, right? God promised, the God that everyone worships and calls the God of the Bible, the God of Israel, right? The same God promised these people, this minority group of people, okay? He promises them like they're supposed to be in a blessed land, not ruled by other nations, peace on earth, no more wars. Like this is supposed to, your God promised you. And look, I'm not trying to be belittling, because I know that people hold the faith and it helps them with like death or just somehow psychologically. I get it. There's certain things like that. I'm not in that kind of in those shoes anymore. But this is my honest assessment. I'm just trying to be honest here. So I hope nobody's disrespected. I'm going to keep it very frank. For thousands and thousands and thousands, I'm just saying, of years, literally 2,000 to 3,000 years, the Jewish people have been promised by their God some things. Okay. The finality of those promises have never taken place. The promises that God has made have not ever taken place. And there's still this lesson of trust God. What God says, you need to trust. This is faith, having faith in God. What the heck? Like, look at what's happened to them, to the point of look at the Holocaust. I mean, you even had Jews that came through the Holocaust and stopped believing finally and said, I got to draw the line. There's no God that could possibly sit through and watch this and be worthy of my worship. But after experiencing this, there's no way I can worship or even think that there's a God out there actually watching what happened.
The Jewish faith is quite interesting, though. It's unlike Islam and Christianity. It's got a unique feature. The Jewish people seems to be in a conflicting relationship with God.
Yeah,
they push one another. The relationship is not of complete submission. God on Trial is a great movie. Where people are about to be burned alive, and they actually make a trial for God. It's a very interesting movie. And Christopher Hitchens once said, "Jewish people have a gene for atheism."
Well, I could tell you that it goes back into the faith thing, and like you get trapped in a circle. Like there's this vicious circular reasoning that happens in the mind where it's like, well, the reason why we're going through this tough time isn't because we're practicing or behaving in a weird way that's causing certain issues between us and other nations or something. No, it's Bobby didn't keep the Sabbath or whatever it might be. I don't know when the next time I'll be able to do a live stream with Bart.
He's very difficult to get hold of, but it seems that Hell Jumper does not know maybe that you've had several conversations with him before in the past. So I might want to go into your channel, which is I've shared here.
Well, Hell Jumper says I would for Derek to do another video with Dr. Bart Ehrman.
Oh, so another. Okay,
right. Okay. So they do know that I've done the interviews. I don't know when the next time I'd even be able to do a live stream with him, but I'm going to be doing recordings with him as I continue doing, because he has lots of courses that I also help to promote. But yeah, I just think that at some point you have to realize the literature is written for that. It's propaganda to convince you. The author wants you to believe. They want you to think this. And in fact, if you read Hebrews 11, like I said, go read it. They're praising people for believing without evidence seen and hoping that these things will come to pass. And in fact, they put this Hall of Fame list. I call them the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Faith fame. It's really like clearly there to get people to see all these examples. Hey, look what happened to Abraham, remember? And you don't know. You have no freaking clue if Abraham even existed. But they assume based on the narrative and the story, they just trust that the stories are true, historically true. Adam and Eve, yeah, this real guy, that's our father. Yeah. Like, dude, this is mythology. There's no historical evidence. So the point I'm making is Hebrews 11 is speaking to a people, and they're happy to hear him say this. Today, you can get Christian apologists like Michael Jones, Inspiring Philosophy, and others who want to come on, and they almost sound like they want to take the other definition of faith. And the other definition, just so you know, there's one, right? And this is the number one in the list here on, if you go to the Oxford Languages Dictionary on Google, just Google faith definition. Number one is complete trust or confidence in someone or something. Okay. By that definition, I have faith in myself. I have faith in, if you want to use the term like this. Number two, which is the one that's biblical here, strong belief in God or in the doctrines of a religion based on spiritual apprehension rather than proof. So it touches on that biblical definition that we were talking about, where these people had, the only thing they had was a voice. According to the story, God said to Noah, God told Abraham, God said to, like he at least gives them something. Now the Christians will go, well, you have it in this Bible that we have here. Here's this voice. Come on.
Derek, can you read that first definition one more time?
Complete trust or confidence in someone or something.
So here we go. Here is the word gymnastic. Confidence and trust. These are two words that can be used in their own right. Because when you have confidence in something, you're aware it is there. There is evidence that it actually exists, and you're just dealing with the scope of that. So when you say I have faith in myself, you know that you exist. Yeah, you've tried your ability. Looks like I've got faith that I'm going to deadlift 250 pounds, right? Whatever. Right. You means you know you exist. You've done this before, but you might have been able to lift 200, and next time you want to push yourself a bit more. Right. But there is evidence of things. So confidence and trust should not be conflated with the word faith. They have their own definitions.
But the thing is what they're trying to argue, like Inspiring Philosophy and others are trying to argue, is that this is the problem, right? Because they're trying to use that first definition in a way. Because they're going to go, well, look, all of these examples here, this is kind of evidence here in a way. Like, we trust this account. And if it's happened to them, we have good reasons to believe, since it's happened to them before, that it'll happen again. Almost like you're saying, if I lifted 225 pounds on the bench press, and I said, next time I'm doing 245, that's 20 pounds more. Now, anyone who lifts weights and knows that's actually a lot. If you're close to your max, that's a ridiculous jump. But anyway, that's a lot of weight to get from 225 if you're maxing to 245. The point is I have evidence through experience and have measured this. I know. Well, if all you have is this literature that's highly legendary, based on narratives that are old stories that are being passed down, and most of this stuff is not historical. Yeah, I have evidence to the contrary. In fact, you could almost say I have faith that Christianity's wrong now. Okay, I have faith that Christianity isn't true. I have a confidence through the scholarship and the very critical, meticulous work that the academics have done on MythVision. I have faith in them. I have trust in their work. And based on observation, that this is not a true religion. Based on the definition they kind of want to use. So my point is, this is clearly telling you, it says in the very first verse of Hebrews 11, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. They don't have evidence. They don't see it. They hope for it. They don't see it. They hope for the resurrection of the dead, of all the dead. No evidence to it. I mean, they want to argue for evidence for Jesus's resurrection, but when you look at Jewish eschatology, you realize there wasn't supposed to be an individual. It was supposed to be like all people. Mm-hmm. And even if there was an individual, as Dale Allison Jr. has recently said, which he's the closest Christian serious academic that I've talked to, he even says Jesus was probably expecting a few months after his death, because he thinks that Jesus predicted his death. He thought he was going to die. Either way, whatever position you take doesn't matter, because he says he thought not too long after he died, the final resurrection of the dead was going to happen.
Yeah.
Did it happen?
He actually said that verbatim to his disciples. This generation won't be over until the kingdom of heaven. So
we have evidence to the contrary, because it didn't happen. So since it didn't happen, Hanny, by the first definition of faith, having faith and trust, I have that definition of faith, that this is not a true religion, and that anything is based off of this religion is false.
Yeah.
So, how we could play definition games.
And we've got scientific falsification of certain premises. For example, Adam and Eve. Scientifically, it couldn't have happened because there's something in biology called minimum founding population, that you cannot start any species with just a female and a male and a female. It cannot work.
Right.
That's why it's called also minimum viable population. When a population of, let's say, the white rhino is down to a male and a female, it's actually, that is a declaration that this species is almost extinct. It couldn't go any further, so it cannot be started that way. It cannot end that way. It's you're a goner. So we've got scientific evidence to falsify the narrative of the Bible. What else can you do?
Right.
I'd like to thank you, Social, a good friend of mine here. Thank you for the super sticker. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so and I'm glad that so talking about evolution, Darwin Day is on the 12th of February, and I am going to have an all-star panel on the 12th. I'm going to have Aaron Ra, I'm going to have Dave Farina of Professor Dave, and I'm going to have Erica.
Oh my gosh.
So that's going to be one hell of a panel.
Woo. And they're all going to be on together?
Yeah.
Good luck to anyone who watches that doesn't already accept evolution. Hey, based on the first definition, I have faith that evolution's true. I mean, based on that first definition, and this is something you see conflated with Christians who argue this. They're like, you have faith that the pilot's not going to crash your airplane when you get on it. And if your definitions, you have trust by that definition because that's how you're defining it, well, this is not the same definition as what it is clearly defined as in the Bible. Like if you told me, Derek, you have faith that you're going to get your wife pregnant and have another child. I've had 3 kids before. Like, I don't really have to trust much. I guess you could say I have confidence because I've been having kids and not too hard to do it again, right? That's not the list that you find, the men of faith in Hebrews 11. The men of faith, it's like the most insane type of claims. 100-year-old man having a kid, Noah, the whole earth supposedly getting flood, or something that's radically almost miraculous that there's no way this is going to happen. But they still believed. And what happens? Contrary to all evidence, what was supposedly promised happens. Contrary to the evidence. That's what makes it so important. That's what made them make the Hall of Fame. If it was to the evidence, why isn't everybody just a believer? I mean, it makes no sense. It's really contrary to the evidence that these people believed still. And according to the narrative, they went out. Now they're the ones listed there. So anyway.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question, Derek, before we get to the super chat questions.
Yeah.
As a believer, back when you were a believer, when confronted by evolution versus the narrative in the Bible, what did you think then? So
what did I think about evolution?
Then, yeah. Did you think it was made up or a conspiracy?
Yeah. Without a doubt. Of course we didn't evolve. I didn't come from no monkeys. Yeah. I literally believed that God created us 7,000 years ago out of dirt and breathed literally into the dirt, gave it life, took from the man's rib after he realized man was not good without a helpmeet, and made a woman out of his side. Now,
the right verb used in the South, I've heard, I did not evolute.
Yeah, right? But then I eventually started to take old Earth creationism possible, but it was like, okay, finally, very old Earth, that didn't mean life was old. Mm-hmm. And things started shattering when you start realizing how old stuff really is. You're like, oh, actually, things are much older than I thought that they were. So then you find really interesting, like, apologetic gymnastics where, like, these Christian apologists will come on and go, well, we believe we evolved. We believe we come all the way from, who knows? Someone might even accept abiogenesis. That doesn't even make them bat their eyes today because they found a way to make it fit. And what they do is they go, well, it was 7,000 years ago, approximately, go by the genealogy, that God breathed a pneuma into Adam. So before that, he was just an animal, so to speak, without actually having the consciousness of God. So how far do you want to go to keep your mythology alive? They're willing to do anything.
It's a moving target. It's very difficult. It's actually unfalsifiable because it doesn't matter what you throw at me. I'm going to find a narrative to the point that you can go with the ID, intelligent design. So you know what? All the science is correct. This is how God's done it.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you repeat that?
After a while, you got to kind of start realizing. I use that recent walking in the sand, and you see 2 footprints with Jesus carrying you. After a while, you have to realize, was he carrying me or was I just walking in the sand? You stop thinking that your imaginary friend or Santa Claus or whatever it might be is the one bringing you gifts, and you find out you kind of look to the side and you realize your parents are the ones setting the gifts under the tree. In an analogy here, you realize it was us. It was our perceptions. It was our minds. This is human, and this is common, and it's all over the world. This is why we find a phenomena like religion all over the world, and everybody has different claims for this very reason. It seems to be an evolutionary byproduct.
I've got an analogy for you, and straight after we take Anna's question.
Yeah.
There's a horror movie called The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and there was a priest going to the girl who is doing all sort of really crazy body movements and the voices and everything, and you're convinced she's possessed, right? Yeah. All the extortionist sort of movements and it's crazy stuff, and you're convinced at that point, and it ended up being she's created an alter ego to deal with a trauma that a very close family member was actually raping her. And that's the way to get out of it, right? And apparently, I'm not sure if I'm right here, but it might have been based on true story.
Okay.
So sometimes through traumas, we create an alter ego so we can cope with difficulties.
Believe it or not, that's exactly what happens. Oh, go ahead. I cut you off.
That's what I'm saying. What if humanity, and I feel for humanity, and I feel for why religion, and that's why I'm not a basher. I completely understand why probably if I existed 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, I would have been religious because that's the only way to survive. Imagine you're afraid of what's going around you. You have no answers, and you create this alter ego of a stronger self. It's almost that's who you are, but a lot more smarter, a lot more stronger, a lot more capable, a lot more in control, and you call that God. And just your reflection, but magnified.
Yeah, I think that, well, it's interesting you say that because there's a bunch of science, I'm sure, to the brain that plays a part of this, and survival, all of these things. There have been cases where many women who've been raped, as you described in this case, but they actually get raped by random people or a family member. A lot of times it's usually a close people in the family. It's someone close. And the trauma was so bad, they don't remember actually being raped. They get pregnant and they actually believe it's a miracle because they don't remember being raped. Their brain almost turns off. Yes. Yeah. And so they're in a protective mode. The brain turns off. They're in a protective mode. Next thing you know, they're seeing a bulge and they go, I've never been with anybody. And they actually are convinced it must be miraculous. So they're pregnant thinking that they're virgins or they haven't been with anybody, having a baby. And in reality, their brains are shut off and they went through such a trauma. And oftentimes, believe it or not, they'll say stuff like an angel came to me. And really they're being raped. So their brain is telling them they had an experience, some type of experience, because their mind is protecting them.
Because remember, the one who's doing the raping is somebody probably they've trusted. And that means a collapse of their own worldview.
Oh.
They cannot admit it. We're talking about, it could be a father. So imagine if a father does that. There is the girl would have to suppress that, because if she actually let that sink in, everything would collapse.
And I mean, I can't even imagine. So the brain, I feel like you're right. Like they hit a wall and it collapses, and then they forget, or they are so traumatized that it makes them forget what happened, and they end up going through this. And that stuff happens. That stuff happens. So there's so much you're saying here, and it just makes you kind of like want to assess this from a naturalist point of view. It's actually more fun. Having these discussions is more fun than playing the faith game and the literature is literally true and Jesus did. It's almost like, actually, let's try to grasp a natural, non-supernatural explanation for the resurrection, or why Paul changed. What he thinks he saw. Was Paul mentally not right, or was Paul so devout and he really had some experience? And that's totally normal. It doesn't take magic to have experiences. I like to do that. I like to try and assess religion based on natural terms today. It's really what drives me to be more interested and know more.
Anna's got a very interesting question here. Is Islam harder to refute than Christianity due to the problem of evil? Or let's talk about the problem of evil. So the problem of evil, it refutes a benevolent God. So a loving God does not exist, but it does not refute all sort of gods, because God could be evil. I won't call it God at that point. I'll call him just a creator rather than God, because I think to be a worship-worthy entity, I think you need to be loving. Otherwise, it's sort of by demand, and therefore I don't think it's a God, it's a creator. Islam, it depends on what school of Islam you belong to. Because it's widely understood that God is a loving God in Islam, which will put him directly back into the problem of evil. But some sects in Islam, they don't see it that way. They see God has created us, and he can do the hell he wants with us. Whatever he wants, whatever he pleases. Even if he just sort of kills a random 2 million people, just one stroke, that is not a problem at all. It could be explained away, and it always explained away, probably in Christian terms. Well, God works in mysterious ways. He's got knowledge that you don't have, and therefore there must be a good reason why he's done so, right. And we will never know. Again, an unfalsifiable position. There's nothing here you can say to refute that, because it's not falsifiable.
And I guess it depends on the Muslim you talk to, just like it depends on the Christian you talk to. I'm curious to know if the acceptance that God is the author of evil, meaning evil exists because God creates light, darkness, good and evil, if God does all these things in most Muslims' minds. Because when I read Romans 9, the Apostle Paul sets up a very strange argument. The whole point of the argument ultimately is God can do whatever he wants. This is honestly his argument. And that God did not break his promise. Okay? So he wants people to know that God has not forgotten the Jews, Romans 9, because he goes to mention, I wish I was cut off from my kinsmen according to the flesh. Talking about Jews, and then of course he incorporates the Gentiles in verse 30 on Romans 9. But he breaks down this argument and says, before Jacob and Esau were even born, so that God's purpose of election might stand, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. He hated Esau, he loved Jacob. Therefore, God doesn't love everybody. He hated Esau. Now, he goes a step further when he explains that before either one of them had even done good or bad, evil or righteousness, whatever, that it's all God's plan. All of this happens. So Paul brings up a hypothetical debater who says, hey, hold on. If all of this is being done by God, then how can God find fault with them? He's the one doing it. And let me read you what Paul says, because this is exactly like, whoa. He doesn't beat around the bush like many apologists who want to try and get God off the hook for evil. This is what he says. All right. So he says in verse 6, it's not as though God's word has failed. Why? Because Jews are rejecting Christ. See? So he's trying to explain why Jews don't want to buy his message, but Gentiles are. And it's a very convoluted argument, but he's like building up this long case. It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. In other words, it is not the children by physical descent who are the God's children. Oh, now you're finding a way to, make it work. But it is the children of promise who are regarded as Abraham's offspring. For this was how the promise was stated: at the appointed time I will return, and Sarah, I will have a son. Not only that, but Rebekah's children were conceived at the same time by our father Isaac. Yet before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose in election might stand, not by works, but by him who calls. She was told, the older will serve the younger, just as is written, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. What then shall we say? Is God unjust? Not at all. For he says to Moses, and this is his apologetic, the word of God says, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. It does not therefore depend on human desire or effort, but on God's mercy. For scripture says to Pharaoh, we remember the story of Pharaoh who didn't want to let the children of Israel go, I raised you up for this very purpose, that I might display my power in you and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. Therefore, God has mercy on whom he wants to have mercy, and he hardens whom he wants to harden. And then he goes on to say, so the person says, one of you will say to me, Paul already expects, then why does God still blame us? And then this is what Paul says. Why does God still blame us? For who is able to resist his will? God causes all of this. And then Paul says, but who are you, O man, to say to the maker, to say to God, why have you made me this way? And then he says, doesn't the maker have right to make you whatever he wants? He's the potter, you're the clay. And that he ultimately makes a special dishes. He makes the term like pottery. So he has special dishes that he's being patient for to glorify in the end. And that he's being patient, to destroy the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction. He made these people for destruction. And some, very few, but special vessels he made for glorification. And this is Paul's apologetic. Paul says, who the hell do you think you are? God can do whatever he wants.
He didn't answer anything. Well,
he didn't answer any. Exactly. All he did was put it in that God mode to go, he can do whatever he wants, so quit questioning.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly like what Job, that final scene with Job as well. I mean, right. God, why were you screwing with me, you and your Lucifer? It's like, where were you when I was creating the galaxies? Again, that's no answer.
It's no answer.
I mean, and that is supposed to be the benevolent God. I mean, okay, that is the words of a dictator. Yes, somebody who is crazy, somebody who's very sadistic, and you can't say, but then he's loving. Right. If God has the foreknowledge of that he's going to create the vast majority of the world's population who's going to end up in hell for eternity, having the foreknowledge of that is evil, because he could have chosen to do otherwise.
Yeah, he doesn't hold God to any of the standards that we have, which is why he can get God off the hook without any effort.
It's insane, that faith game, because it will actually... Now, back to the faith situation. When you had faith, what was your life like? How did you approach life normally, as in with your friends? Did the faith thing affect your ability to make decisions?
Did it affect it?
Yeah, scrutinizing information and coming up with the right decisions and things like that.
I would imagine to some degree there was an impact over time, depending on the time of my life, because part of you tell yourself this narrative. Well, I did when I became Reformed. I thought I was chosen, predestined, and you almost feel a bit bulletproof. You've been reading all these stories and you believe them literally. I believed that Jonah was swallowed by a fish for 3 days and 3 nights and God spit him up. What is the moral of that story? Of course, the moral technically now is that, just listen to God, don't fight God. And especially if there's enemies and God tells you to go and try and have them, tell them to, hey, repent, turn, God won't destroy you, that kind of thing. So really it's a lesson to don't be like Jonah, but that God will show mercy even to your enemies. But
Yeah.
in the reading of it as a faithful believer, you almost identify with Jonah. So you feel like, okay, I could get swallowed by a fish and God would like make sure that I don't die. So you almost are willing to almost tempt fate in a way. I'm using fate to kind of, analogize to like, you're willing to risk more. You'll walk into a burning building. You might step in front of a gun and say, God won't let you shoot me. That bullet won't hurt me. And it's like, hey, dumbass, yeah.
We have an Aussie girl by the name of Sia. She got a very interesting song called Bulletproof, and that song might. And it's a fish, not a whale, huh? So it's a fish, not a mammal, because whale is a mammal, and again, the Bible. A bat is a bird according to the Bible.
Well, I don't think they understood that a whale was a mammal either. So, I don't mind using the term whale and, or giant fish, doesn't matter. I use both synonymous in the biblical sense, but I just think that it makes you almost infantile in your reasoning sometimes, where you almost think like, well, nothing can harm me. I am a child of God. I can get, and, you see idiots have done this. And I mean idiots because I was kind of an idiot at times, because you're just trained to think this way. Look at the guys who go down to like Aborigines, random islands by like non-infiltrated tribes that are like cannibalistic or extremely warlike tribes that are down in South America or in these weird island areas, right? Where we haven't infiltrated with our modern ideas. And these people get killed. They go in there gullible thinking, I'm going to go in here and just be super, and God will protect me. And it's like, dude, the same kind of thing happened to Sabbatai Zevi, the Jewish, cult leader, I'll call him. He goes to a king, an Islamic king, thinking he's going to convert the guy to Judaism. And guess who converted to Islam? Yeah. When the sword was at his throat and he realized, oh, snap, maybe he was living in this little like matrix of faith in his mind, thinking, I hope for it. And I believe it so much that it's true. It's almost like that secret. People believe like, if I have positive thinking and I believe it, it'll come to pass and it'll happen. And like abracadabra, it'll happen. So yes, reasoning, I think for many, especially if they're reading faith the way biblical Hebrews 11 is, it's definitely going to mess with your.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Derek. Pentecostal is the sect that sometimes get bitten by snakes on purpose, just to show that that they're invincible if the God's word is going through their veins.
Yeah, so there's snake handling churches, and usually they're in a camp like the Pentecostals, and they're reading a added on, not even original to the Gospel of Mark passage in order to, draw the conclusions.
Yeah. So that's that power of invincibility. If God is on your side, then that's it. But it comes as an individual. It comes as also as groups of people, because it seems that God is taking sides. He said he loved one brother and hated the other. God is not even-handed dealing with the word. He's got his favorite from day one. Cain and Abel, a couple of offerings. I prefer the meat. I don't like the veggies. Obviously, we know God wasn't vegetarian then. By then, right. He loved the smell of barbecue, according to the Old Testament as well.
Imagine when all humans, just think about this, bro, because naturalism makes the most sense. I mean, we can't be 1,000,000% certain on this, but like naturalism makes the most sense. Just imagine, play with me for 1 second. Humans, let's just pretend we fast forward 500 years. It's outlawed to eat meat. In order for us as humans to survive, what I'm trying to say is life will go extinct if we continue on the diet. Let's just say that's the case. I can't predict the future, but let's just say we're multiplying. We have too many people now, and we don't have enough species to survive off of meat. We found a new diet. These people have found that it is illegal and it is the most heinous of crimes to kill life, like living animals, to eat. You're almost equivalent to a human cannibal today, in today's time, in 500 years now, if you ate chicken or beef or whatever, right? So we're looking back 500 years, you and me are in the future, and we're going, damn, those immoral people in 2022, what horrible humans we were. We were bad, right? What I was getting at with this whole notion is, imagine if this religion survived in some form, and later Christians have found a way, somehow they're trying to read these passages where God was a meat eater and liked the smell of meat. Well, their argument is, well, it's not because he was going to eat it. God's metaphysical and outside space and time. It's because God just liked the smell of it. But then how do they morally justify God killing or allowing these humans to kill the animal just for the mere pleasure? How will they at that point make sense of their existence, their perception on the world around them due to the fact they can't eat animals? And now we're so close to the very little bit of life that's left that we haven't destroyed by now that they have some cognitive dissonance. How are they going to explain this? Their text.
The treatment of animals from day one. Look at the scapegoating in the Jewish tradition of two goats, and one has been pushed off the cliff, thrown from a mountain. Even its meat is not being used properly. It's just as a sacrifice. All the way to the meek and mild Jesus, where he exorcised a possessed woman, and instead of just getting these evil spirits to vanish or get destroyed or annihilated, it goes into a herd of swine, and they just go off the cliff and die. What the poor things? What have they done? I mean, think this is the creator here. Is this the best he could have done?
Well, it's funny you say that. I do think that that's obviously not true. I think it's a story.
Yeah.
And I think Christians eventually, I'm projecting here, but I think eventually they're going to see this as a story too. I think they're going to allegorize this. That's my point. They're going to get away from this actually having happened. If Christianity in any of its forms today even exists by then, the way that we're advancing technologically and in our awareness of things, it'll be hard. I mean, sure, there might be Amish type Christians out there, but imagine how the Amish look to us today. Christians then might look like Amish compared to the rest of civilization by then. Who knows? Now, in this book, I'm pulling this book up because you brought it up. Dennis MacDonald, he did this. It's synopsis of epic tragedy in the Gospels. We did a course, and I'm going to be editing that and getting that ready to launch. Let me tell you, you're going to want to participate because that exact passage, so it's the story of a demoniac, a person who's demon possessed. He's in the countryside, meaning he's not near any civilization. He's living in tombs. Really, it's the dead, right? Or in caves inside tombs. And he's lawless, it describes, cutting himself and screaming. And people were like, whoa, this guy's crazy. Nobody wants to go near him, that type of thing. Eventually, Jesus confronts him, and he ends up casting out the demons and put them in the pigs. The pigs run off into the water. 2,000, or really it's Legion, okay? Legion is the Roman, it's a jab at Rome. Now, here's the deal. That story is lifted, and Dennis shows and breaks it down from the Odyssey. Odysseus and them go to the island the island of Calypsis or something. It's where the Cyclops is. It's a lawless Cyclops that lives in a cave, and he breaks down the connections and parallels finally to the point to even when it's over with, right? Circe in a whole nother passage, which is right there near the same story about the Cyclops. Circe turns these soldiers into pigs in the Odyssey.
Wow.
Literally, yeah, look, it's so mythology, it's not even funny. So what happens is Jesus is leaving and he's going, and the demoniac's like, let me come with you. And Jesus is on the boat saying, no, he's kind of yelling from the boat, hey, you can't go tell those people, go and tell them what happened or something. I don't know. He says something from a boat. The same way Odysseus is on a boat leaving the island, he screams at the Cyclops, remember the one who took your eye, son of so-and-so. It's not identical. None of it is. It's a rewrite, but it's mythology. And eventually Christians, I think, will finally realize this, hopefully. If not, it's going to go extinct.
That's why the Gospels are written in Koine Greek. The Greek fingerprints are all over the Gospels.
Bingo. Well, it's not only that. It's not just that it's Greek. You bring up a very important point, Dennis says. And the point is, in order to learn Greek in any school out there, to become someone who writes, who's educated, they taught you Homer, the epics, Odyssey and Iliad. You had to learn this. And by the way, it was not the language that it's Greek, but it's a different form of Greek, kind of like King James is a different form.
Yeah, Koine, it's called Koine Greek, yeah.
And they had to learn a Greek that wasn't really their Greek to learn how to write good in their stories, because that was the gold standard of the best stories ever written was the Odyssey and the Iliad. And of course, you had Euripides' Bacchae, and the Aeneid literally is a rewrite of the Odysseus Greek story for Rome. So it's actually about Augustus, and there's all sorts of stuff of the founding of Rome. They rewrote the mythology. Well, guess who else is rewriting mythology? And there's a new founder with a kingdom of God, not the emperor. They're writing these gospels after all the crazy crap happened in 70. Remember, you had, well, it's not just 70. You had Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, first emperor, nephew of Caesar. He adopts him, okay? He is the first emperor. Who's the next? Tiberius. We know what happened to that guy. He liked to go on those islands and sleep with little boys and have crazy sex orgies and stuff. Not the best example for an emperor. You know what? The next should be better, right? Wrong. The next comes in and he's even worse. Now, at first, he's like, great, they had a golden age. So it gets worse. The empire or the kingdom of Rome is just getting worse to the point where there's a moment where there's a war for 4 kings. Who's going to be the emperor? We didn't even know who the emperor was. So Christians, Jews, and those who are sympathetic to the Jesus movement are saying Rome's about to be done. These are signs that God is going to destroy this stupid pagan empire, right? Jesus's kingdom's coming in. So they rewrite these mythologies called gospels about this guy named Jesus. And what does he have? An everlasting kingdom. What does he bring? Well, in some cases, he doesn't bring peace, but he's supposed to bring peace. There's certain places where he says he's bringing peace. There's the place where he says, I do not come to bring peace. I bring a sword, but it's like division between family members. The point is, his kingdom is supposed to be set up everlasting. And the same words in Luke about the peace thing, I'm telling you, is the same words of the Pax Romana that the emperors promised. And in fact, Augustus promised it and did keep it for a long time. So anyway, it's a jab. It's political. It's polemical. It's mythology. It's amazing, man, to find out.
That's why the God of Christianity is completely different than the God of the Jewish people and the God of Islam. It's like somewhere in between, and then suddenly, like, you've got Islam and Judaism, and then Islam, and it seems to be the same sort of type of God. You know, the wanderers, the desert dwellers. You know, he's rough, he's in your face, he's blunt, and then suddenly Christianity comes in the middle. And it's a completely different type of God.
Yeah, Marcion thought the same. Well, and there's little weird clues, right? And I think this might be the fact that there's some conflation going on between Greek and Hebrew literature. But Marcion went, Jesus as God cannot be the God of the Hebrew Bible. He just cannot be. And Jesus says stuff like, no one has seen the Father except the Son. What? There's people in your book that say they've seen God and lived. Now, you can try to argue and go, well, they didn't really see God. Come on. How far do you want to go? So obviously there's issues, there's contradictions, and the problems. And Marcion wanted to resolve it by showing God is love. That God is the demiurge, which is the evil creator, which actually created this substance. No wonder it sucks, you know, and this flesh, it gets old, and there's all sorts of bad things in the world around us and things. That's because this was created by the bad God, but the good God, Jesus is God, is above that God. And this God, the creator God, doesn't even know it. Can you imagine being a creator and not knowing you have a God that's above you? And like, it's a really wild way of trying to make sense of the world.
It's almost like the cartoon Dark Matter. You know, remember when they killed God?
And then God goes up and he's like,
there's another God.
Well, I'm an atheist. God is an atheist. Technically, you would, if you use the analogy, kind of funny, God is an atheist, right? There's no other gods except like he's the only thing, and like there's nothing above you. But then he dies and he goes up and he's like, God? And it's like, ha, 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 ha. And then all of a sudden, boom, that God dies. and then it floats up again, and it's like the next god that's above that god, and it never ends. Turtles all the way down. You know what I mean?
I like the way that it goes all the way to up to the very last god, but then it comes back to humanity and say, we have created all these gods.
That's it.
It's a brilliant dark matter. 2525. It's a wonderful little cartoon.
Yep.
I love the angel. The angel is just fantastic. He keeps pressing God and asking really embarrassing questions. Topic discussed. Thank you very much for the sticker. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you're enjoying the chat.
Gary, my buddy Gary.
Oh, thank you, Gary. Dafa Raffaelli is got a question. Who are the top 20 scholars, the smart and objective scholars? What they say about Jesus' divinity? Did Jesus claim to be God? Who is the best modern scholar?
Oh, wow. This is the way that this question is phrased. I have to divide my thinking here to give you why I'm saying this way. Okay. First things first. Did Jesus actually claim to be God? The historical Jesus? No. Did that mean that he was somewhat divine, that he was a demigod, that he was a son of God? Sure. But he was not God. In fact, that's what, James Tabor, I recently did the course with on the Gospel of Mark. The earliest story about Jesus is Mark. And in Mark, someone comes to him and says, "Good master, what shall I do to attain eternal life?" Or whatever. I can't remember what he says in that gospel. I might have conflated them, but he says, "Good master." And Jesus literally says to him, "Why do you call me good? There's none good but God." And then he quotes the Shema. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one." Jesus is saying, don't call me good. Only God is good. He's not God. Now, if you're asking whether in some of the narratives he is equated with God, or in some way there's funny business going on with that he is divine and even claiming to be somewhat divine, in the narrative, yes. In the narratives. In Mark, it seems he's a reflection. He has the power. He's been empowered by God. Later, there's some tricky stuff where you almost think he's demiurgic. And what I mean by that is he's like a creator type, where the Logos was Jesus before he comes in the flesh, and that he's kind of participating in the creation. Mm-hmm. This is something you see in Colossians, and Paul seems to think that Jesus is somewhat of a creator. Not that he is the creator God, but he's through whom all things get created. So he is elevated in this status in some way, according to some scholars. Depends on the scholar you ask, because James Tabor thinks that the Philippian hymn in Philippians 2, where it talks about, though he was just a man, did not see himself to be equal to God. A lot of people think this is a pre-existent narrative, that Paul thinks Jesus pre-existent, humbled himself below, like lowered himself down from heaven from being divine, took on flesh, a lowly human, became a servant, died, and then God elevates him back up. The way that James Tabor, D.G. Dunn, other academics take it is, what Paul's actually saying here is Adam. Paul talks about Adam a lot in Corinthians, and he equates first Adam, last Adam. The first Adam failed, the last Adam's Jesus, he succeeds. Well, in this Adam theology, he says that he didn't see himself equality with God being something he could grasp in the Philippians hymn. Well, in the interpretation these guys are taking is that Paul is saying Jesus is like Adam, a mortal man, just like Adam. And where Adam ate the fruit, he went to grasp the fruit. He wanted to take immortality like God. Jesus didn't. So another mortal decides he's not going to be like God and try to take the fruit. He humbles himself to death. And by that death, God then exalts him. Apotheosis makes him exalted above all names, and it is by his name that all men shall be saved. Jesus' name is the best name, pretty much. That's the name of all names, the highest name, Jesus. Because instead of like Adam eating the fruit with Eve in the garden, he humbles himself. That's the interpretation they take. Others think that the language kind of gives the idea that he is pre-existent and divine, but then lowers himself and humbles himself, becomes a human, dies, and then just gets exalted even higher than he was before. I don't know the truth of this. I don't know. I'm sympathetic to both views.
Don't you think the Gospel of John with the high Christology is different than the other three being
Yes.
pretty much? There is a bit of a hint that he might be now saying, hey, Jesus' way, obviously, he never say anything straightforward.
Yeah. He's definitely divine above and beyond. And in fact, I think, again, going back to this, and in our course that's coming up, this book's amazing, and it's not hard to read. I thought it was going to be hard. I'm looking. There's certain parts you kind of have to know what you're looking at in order to get it, but it's really an easy read, and it really takes you through material. Jesus is the new and better Dionysus in the Gospel of John. The very first miracle, he turns water into wine. First miracle. Listen, even in the Bacchic traditions, in Euripides, Bacchae, and others, Dionysus says he is the true vine, because the vine is where the grape comes from, and it is the Bacchic rituals where the Maenads go into a frenzy. It's where old men feel young, get them drunk. Notice how quick an old man acts like he's a kid because he's drunk. Alcohol, right? The wine, it's something Dionysus does. That's almost a miracle, many people would say. Well, Jesus's first act was that, and who is the true vine in the gospel? Jesus says, I am the true vine. I am the door. I am this. There are a lot of hints and symbols and such in here, even to the eat my flesh and drink my blood. When Jesus says that in the Greek, in the Gospel of John, he says, chew my flesh. And in the Dionysian story, the Titans chewed Dionysus as a child and ate him. His mother, Semele, drinks some type of slushy or magical drink with him and literally gets pregnant with him and literally incarnates him, but she dies by Zeus. Zeus puts him in his bosom and literally births Dionysus. So Dionysus comes back again and he resurrects from the dead, literally.
But apart from all these markers, but I think Dionysus was a bit of a mischievous. He's almost like akin to Loki. He was a little bit of a... Yeah, so maybe it's not exactly him copy. Maybe Jesus is a Frankenstein of...
Well, he's better than Dionysus, because every time the stuff happens, he shows mercy. Dionysus shows wrath.
Yeah.
So there are times where you're like, hold on, this isn't identical. No, it's oftentimes the opposite, because they're not writing, hey, I want Jesus to be Dionysus. Think bigger. Don't think they want to copy. Think that these guys want you, the pagan who worships Dionysus, to realize that Jesus is so much better than Dionysus. He is going to show mercy. He's the bigger man. You know how we say the bigger man isn't the guy who goes to try and start the fight. It's the guy who walks away. Well, that's like a cliche that we say. The tough guy is the one who can swallow that abuse and walk away and not have it completely bother him. It's not always the guy who comes in as the aggressor. It's the guy who can take the punch and say, nah, I'm good. Be the bigger man and walk away. Well, Jesus is the bigger man in this kind of narrative where rather than destroy the people, Cadmus and others that are in the narrative of Bacchae, he shows mercy. And they're trying to say to the Gentiles, to the pagans, hey, our God is so much better than your God. He not only can do the miracles your God can do, but he's a better person. Do you really think that's a good God?
Saying that he threw the toys from the pram a couple of times, when he was 13, went to the temple and got really annoyed by the people. And then that poor fig tree that he passed, and there was no fig, it was not even in season, and he cursed it not to ever fruit again. Like sometimes these little things are like out of character, man.
Well, here's the deal. Again, if you want to hear something about that tree and why this fruit, why is he cursing? It's not like he doesn't know it's out of season. Yeah. It's not like he doesn't know it's out of season. So why is this narrative saying Jesus is cursing a fig tree that's not producing fruit?
It's now, obviously an allegory, yeah, to the tribe.
It is, and it is talking about Israel, Jerusalem, right? It's talking about Jerusalem, but where they're lifting this idea that he runs into a tree that doesn't carry fruit, There's a Greek story in the mythology in which this author would have known, in where you're going to find all that you need to know about this, and you'll be blown away to see it. It's not only that the Gospels are borrowing from the Greek, they're borrowing also from the Hebrew Bible. So you're going to find this, you're going to see both happening. Anyway, this is, I love this stuff. But top 20, Dafa, I honestly just would say watching MythVision. I mean, I'm going to be biased about who I think the top scholars are because I definitely pick the people I want on the channel. I would recommend just any scholar you see that I'm presenting that's a New Testament scholar. You're going to find good critical stuff. Even the Christian scholars like Dale C. Allison Jr., he is fair. I've got his commentary on Matthew. This guy will tell you, Jesus didn't say that. That's probably been put in his.
And I think as with any critique of the Gospels, whether it's coming from a historicist or a mythicist or a believer in the faith, at the end of the day, this is not science. This is not something that you can go to an experiment in a lab. These are going to be people who are going to be reading the text in a certain way, and you gotta. If this was me, I'd listen to them all.
Yeah.
Because that's what make the story interesting, and I look at the different angles and who makes more sense to me. But I mean, Bart Ehrman is definitely one of my top. He taught me a lot, and he seems to be fair because Bart, when confronted with contradictions in the Bible, he said, actually, that's not a contradiction. You got to make a difference between an actual contradiction and one that might be seen from a different vantage point. Right. So he's spared that way. He doesn't because he's now left the faith. He's not gonna say that this is wrong, this is horrible, this is wrong. He doesn't approach it that way. I find him quite fair when there's so he doesn't put his passion into the things. He's actually dealing with the text quite intellectually and quite impassionately. He's not that involved emotionally into things. But then you got the Richard Carrier and the Robert Price who would actually see these figures. Jesus never even existed, and these are interesting stories been stitched together.
So just real quick, Dafa says Del C. Jesus didn't say that on Matthew. I have a hard time understanding what he's saying, but I'm trying to look and see where I put his commentaries. All right, so back in the day, Del C. Allison Jr. from Princeton University wrote commentaries on Matthew. And in his commentaries, he expounds pretty heavily on the Gospel of Matthew. And you'll find that much of what is in here, he'll say Jesus didn't say. And much of what he has in there, he'll say Jesus might have said. And so, like, he's very good about saying, I think that Jesus did this and here's why. Or I think Jesus said this and here's why. And then sometimes he'll go, but these other scholars, this is what a good commentary does. It gives you more than one point of view in it. These other scholars, they say this, and they could be right, but I take this position, or I agree with those other scholars, and here's my conclusion. Anyway, like I'll give you an example. This isn't on the divinity stuff that Dafa was talking about, but Jesus says to the disciples, you will not have gone through all of the houses of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Mm-hmm. The disciples, like the Son of Man should come, you will not have even gone through all the houses. That's how soon the end was supposed to happen. Now, many scholars have different takes on this, but most of them will say this sounds like a fossil that might actually go back to Jesus. And the reason they think that is because it failed. Would a Christian put this in the mouth of Jesus if it weren't from Jesus and it looks embarrassing? So are they still carrying some evidence of something that was spoken or that goes way back, whether you can't prove it actually comes from Jesus? Could have been an earlier Christian community that thought the second coming was going to happen. They just went around and preached in the communities of Israel. Point is though, like, he's not so sure. But a lot of the stuff in there, he'll be like, red flags. Not sure if that happened. I'm not sure. So I just, that's why I brought him up, because he's a Christian. I usually will mention that when I listed all these liberal non-Christian scholars. People go, well, that's a bias. And it's like, well, I'm looking for scholars that are seriously not out here trying to tell you, oh, and Jesus rose from the dead and it's just clear as day and you should just read your Bible. It's like, to me, I have a hard time thinking that they're not going to let their pins slip. Gary Habermas, N.T. Wright, people like that who are trying to do historical research, they say. And as Paula Fredrickson says, there are people who masquerade as historians in New Testament that are really apologists in historian clothing, but they're really apologists.
That's interesting. So yeah, I think the advice is to listen to as many and draw your own conclusions. Topic discussed. Thank you very much, Gary. Is it now? So now I know him, but Gary, thank you very much, Gary. That's Jesus to Pilate. Yeah.
Yes. So now I'm looking. I want to see which gospel this specific. I think this is Matthew, but it might be Luke. My kingdom is not of this world.
Might have mentioned a couple actually. I'm just trying to remember now. Maybe
that's John.
It is John.
Yeah, John keeps coming up. Let me see. Is synoptic? Might be in Luke, but I think this is a later. John 18 keeps coming up, so it sounds like no wonder it's such a late idea that my kingdom is not of this world.
Yeah, because then it was not fulfilled, and he was, executed, and then this is like an apology for what actually happened.
It is, because the kingdom was not what it became.
Yeah.
It became spiritual, and now they're blaming the Jews. Notice this is in the context of Rome because Pontius Pilate. So the Gospel of John loves to generalize and uses the term Judaios, which means Jews, a lot. And here, who gets blamed? Listen, they're arresting me. I mean, you don't have anything to worry about, Mr. Roman. My kingdom isn't even of this world. It's I'm not trying to compete with Rome. My stuff is in heaven, and it gets away. It's unfalsifiable. So it creates a spiritual unfalsifiable position, which is what happens in any apocalyptic movement. When it fails, they either recalculate the date, which we see in the New Testament as well, 2 Peter 3, or they make it spiritual. So like what happened in 1834, 33 with the Millerites. Well, this day I calculated the second coming's going to happen. Nothing happened. Actually, what he did is he left the throne room and went down into the lower heaven of the heavens that he's going to, and it's like, can you prove them wrong that that's not true? No, you can't. It's unfalsifiable. Do you have any reason to believe what he said is true?
And maybe he's given also a hint to the Jewish people and say, hey, you know that kingdom you've been waiting for all that time? You got it wrong. It's not just a king who's going to bring you your glory days. It's a different type of kingdom. It's the It's the ultimate kingdom. It's the one that lasts forever.
Yep. And if they're trying to infiltrate a Roman Empire and they're trying to get Romans on board, you don't want them thinking you're talking about usurping Caesar or anything like that. You want something that will be adapted to the Roman Empire. You want people to want to join. And in fact, Luke does this really well too. Luke, the Gospel of Luke and Acts is painted toward the Romans. It's actually heading in the direction of Rome. That's why the whole missions with Peter, and then it's Paul, and Paul's like, take me to Caesar. Like, Caesar will show that I'm innocent. The whole time he's writing, O Theophilus, at the beginning of Luke, he's writing potentially to a patron, someone who has a lot of money, and a God lover or a God-fearer. This is common. We found synagogues, for example, that have inscriptions of God-fearers' names. These are pagans who funded building synagogues and Jewish, worship places and stuff, reading places. And so if this author is writing, let's just say, to a very rich, high-up God-fearer, they respect Jesus, but they have a lot of money and they need them to fund them. Hey, O Theophilus, O God-fearer, God-lover, this is written to you. And then he makes this case from Luke all the way to the end of Acts, because it's the same author, to try and convince this guy that at every turn, it was those Jewish leaders that were truly conspiring to try and kill Christians. They stoned Stephen to death. They constantly want to try and kill the Christians. And it was the Christians who were found innocent every time. So it's propaganda. And he's trying to convince them because a lot of times Christians were put to death. I mean, they were tried. They went to prison. They were literally witnesses in court becoming martyrs. these are witnesses. So a martyr is a witness. And so these people, that's the direct actual term, is a witness. That means they must have appeared in court quite often. And they're probably breaking the law, by the way, going out there doing things and preaching and things that they shouldn't be doing because they think the end is near. So they're a little bit probably wacky, and they get arrested and then get killed. And what do the Christian community say? Martyr, you saint. So they're really innocent. But this is propaganda in Acts. They're trying to paint a narrative like the Christians weren't guilty. And in fact, every time they try to charge them for something, they were found innocent. Herod Antipas, I find nothing wrong with the guy. What's the Roman? Every time a Roman gets him, oh my gosh, he's a Roman citizen and he's innocent. Oh, I can't believe I whipped you. I'm so sorry. Like every time the Christians are found innocent, propaganda. But the Jews, over and over, are not. So there's a divorce that starts to happen between real Jewish kingdom and Jewish teaching in Matthew. Do not forsake the Torah. Not one jot and tittle of this law will pass away, to where you start finding, oh, those Jews, the guilty Jews, and it's really explicit, and it gets worse over time. That's what I think is happening.
That's why the Catholic Church, until I think the 60s or the 70s, they called the Jewish people committing a deicide. They are the killers of God, and only in recent decades they just came back and apologized, and that what caused a lot of issues. That sort of belief. I mean, the opposite to the belief that Hitler was an atheist, but actually he was a very wacky, strange Christian.
Yep.
This could be drove his belief to kill the Jews and among other minorities.
He's written on this, yes.
In Mein Kampf, yeah, it's in Mein Kampf.
He thinks he was doing the will of God by doing this, yeah. It's pretty sick.
The buckle of the belt, as always Christopher Hitchens would have said, in the Second World War, the German soldiers have on the buckle of the belt, "Gut Gott mit uns," God with us. Yet we are always faced as an atheist. I'm faced with, Hitler's was an atheist. No, he was not. He was a crazy Christian, though.
Can I shoot it to you straight though? Honestly, I want to be accurate historically. It wouldn't matter to me if he was or wasn't at the end of the day.
I agree.
I just want to say that, because it's like this whole, he was an atheist. He wasn't an atheist. I want to be historically accurate, and he wasn't an atheist. But at the end of the day, if he was, it doesn't matter. The only reason they're saying that is, again, propaganda. If you become an atheist, you like Hitler. You believe like Hitler. You're going to be Hitler. You have no morality. Look at what he did. He cooked people in the ovens. And what happens when they start to realize, oh no, actually he was a theist who actually believed in the God. He was a Christian who may not have been the best of Christians, of course. I'm simply pointing, he categorized himself thinking he's doing the will of God, and he was a Christian. And the Catholic Church even helped support the things that were happening. Then what? What kind of cognitive dissonance do you face then? Are you going to then, well, he just wasn't a good Christian. Okay. So no matter what you do, they find a way out of the argument because he's either an atheist. Oh no, he's not an atheist. Then he's not a true Christian. Technically, he's not a Christian because a Christian wouldn't do that. So he's a fake Christian. Whoop-de-frickin' do at the end of the day. I don't even care. Nothing.
Cool. The no true Scotsman fallacy.
Right. And I don't care about whether he was or wasn't in the, technically, for the argument's sake. Historically, it's interesting to find out they're wrong about that argument. I heard Ravi Zacharias, all these guys used to do that for a long time, try to argue that exact point you bring up. But at the end of the day, what Stalin, what Hitler, what people in World War II did in political power and the nonsense that happened there has no bearing on a humanist like me. I am not interested in that. I want to try and show peace and love, and I do not in any way think that these people were good representatives at all, whatever positions they hold to. Horrible.
Agreed. It's an infantile kind of conversation to go, which camp did he belong to? Because then it makes me look better. I wouldn't even use it against the Christians as something against Christianity.
Right.
For the same reason. He was just an asshole.
Dude, he was not a good Christian. Even if he thought he was doing the will of God, this guy was not actually following good practices. He was caught up in the propaganda, anti-Jewish rhetoric, probably other ideas also, not just Christianity. So no, I wouldn't want to use this against Christians at all. But when Christians have propagated this argument to try and act like this is the representative of atheism, and it's like, what representative? I mean, like, no, what the hell? So it's just because what we find is Russia was actually an atheist country. I mean, they really had a political atheist propaganda. They wanted to indoctrinate kids to become atheists the way they are. And we've come a long ways, by the way, since this, but I would not try to put that on all people who are atheists. I am an atheist because the evidence is found wanting. And I'm an atheist the same reason I don't believe actual magical unicorns exist. Like, that does not take any politics for me to, like, you know, I have changed and shifted my politics since becoming an atheist. But my point is like, it doesn't require government. It doesn't require anything for me to realize the evidence that you're presenting is not good. And it's simple as that.
Thank you very much, Marge, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. On the situation with the, I think Christopher Hitchens once said as well about forcing people to become an atheist or to be atheist. I think it's the same. It comes from the same problem of trying to force people to be religious. Yeah,
they're trying to reverse the religious indoctrination by becoming dogmas in their own right. Exactly.
Absolutely. And I remember Christopher Hitchens said, if you are in the business of dictatorship, you're not good at your job if you don't use the reservoir already in the Russian community by the Tsar and the Orthodox Christianity to come and try to replace that and install yourself in its place. So you're using that reservoir of incredulity, of ignorance, of submission, and just shift, remove God from the chair and put yourself onto it and demand certain things and say, you shall listen to my will, and then call it atheism. That's not atheism, because atheism, if you don't reach that conviction by researching and by understanding the evidence, and it's being forced onto you or having to inherit it from your parents, then it unfortunately becomes a kind of a religion, which is not. It shouldn't have, but that's what it. And we're trying to avoid this human experience. Never again. If somebody does that, then this is not proper atheism. Atheism is, you have to reach that conclusion yourself based on evidence and not because it's been forced upon you.
Right. I think that I don't even try to put atheism in a category of like, we need to do this, we need to do that. So many people are different. People are atheists with different points of view. For me, it is simply, it's not a movement. And even though there's a movement of people who call themselves atheists, there are a community of atheists, if you will. I just don't, I think it's more of just what I think atheism is I don't believe a God exists. And they'll go, well, you believe that no God exists, or you lack belief. And it's like, you really get caught up in this terminology of is it lacktheism or is it atheism? And for me, I actively don't believe that God exists, even if I don't have 100% certainty that God doesn't exist.
But that's why you say, I don't believe. You're not saying, I know. But you don't say, because there are two different phrases. He said, I know God doesn't exist.
Right. I'm extremely confident, I'll put it this way, that the God described in the Bible, that the God described in Islam or, you know, any of these other man-made religions, I'm extremely confident that these are constructs of humans and not actual divine beings. I cannot prove without a shadow of a doubt that something hasn't happened or there isn't something out there. I find it ironic that if there was, how ridiculous the hide and seek is for this deity, this being. So I am extremely confident. And there's some stuff I would say that I feel like I could make a case to argue why I think there's no reason to believe this God exists at all.
When we switch seats at some point and I come to your channel, I want to propose the strongest argument against the existence of God. I think even stronger than the problem of evil. Okay. It's an argument developed by a Canadian philosopher, Schellenberg, in 1993, called the divine hiddenness, or the argument from non-belief. This is a slam dunk. It's a syllogism. It's a two propositions and a conclusion. Wow. and there is no way you can get out of it. It doesn't appeal to emotions at all. It's just stone cold logical, and I don't think you can get out of it. Or anybody can get out of it. I have not heard one single refutation of it.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, I definitely want to check that out.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we're moving on with the faith business. Some people say, look, we are humans. We're quite arrogant, and we have we have confidence that we know a lot of things, and we strayed away from God. Faith is a sort of a humbling experience. This is when you kind of surrender your will.
Mm-hmm.
You no longer you're not in control, and we know that we're not in control, but you sort of give that control to some other entity, to the Father in heaven, who will look after you. Isn't it humbling to have faith in things? It's a serene thing, because once you do that, the conflict within you stops, and you surrender to the will of God, and then you are in the hands of the most merciful.
Right.
How can you be wrong? What do you think of that sort of emotional appeal to faith?
I mean, that's what you hear a lot. That's exactly the approach that's given in church. I mean, and notice it always works with people who are in a bad crisis situation or something's not going their way. I remember I used to go to the non-denominational church. They were very good with their music, worship and praise. And then the pastor, he's almost cold reading. In fact, it's like a cold reading. For those who don't know what a cold reading is so like you go to someone who says they can talk to the dead, or they typically, you've seen this with like John Edwards, or like other supposed palm reading magician types that know magical things. They speak to people, and they go in, they go, someone with an S, it's a she. With an S, Sally, Susie, Cindy, Samantha, Samantha. You said Samantha, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Someone's gonna have no. Maybe it wasn't an S. Maybe it was their kid. Someone with an S could be a friend. I mean, like they'll go until they get a hit.
Somebody will get the bait.
Right. And so at church, when you have 500 people in your church and the music's going just right, you know what the pastor would do? And I noticed this, and I looked back, and I was like, this guy's clever. He'd go up, and the music's going just right, and he'd get up on that mic, and he'd go, someone in here, your marriage is broken. You and the relationship of the woman that you love so much, it isn't going good. God hears you, and things will start to go right. He's saying, let it go. Surrender to me. I can burden those burdens. And the music's going. You got the music, right? So I'm just playing along. And you know how many marriages at all times are going through some friction? I said something I shouldn't have. She pissed me off. He pissed me off. I found him looking at another girl. Whatever. I'm just giving you an example. And then that music is just right. And that voice that he knows what to do and how to say, but it's okay. All of that can be forgotten right now. You can start over brand new. You can walk out of this building when this is done, and you can know that this is true. Just come down and let us pray for you. Lord Jesus, I pray right now in the name of Jesus. Listen to them. They're broken. They're trying, Lord. They're struggling. You went through the burdens as well, Jesus. I mean, I'm just giving you, I literally memorize. I know this off the top. Next thing you know, the guy's crying. And he's like, and he loves her so much, and he wants things to be right. Boom! The dude just did like a form of therapy. It works. They have a placebo effect. They leave the church. Holy smokes, the Holy Ghost touched me. And next thing you know, they're happy for the next 2 or 3 days till the placebo wears off. He calls her a bitch, and she's like, I'm not a bitch, you asshole. And then, oh my God. And then, listen, the Lord is telling me something. The Lord is telling me something right now. There's somebody struggling in their marriage. Damn it, you said this last week, Bobby. No, you don't understand. This week, it's even more intense of a marriage issue. And then, dude, who doesn't have this problem? And so there's a solution to your problems, because everyone has problems, and the message always gets people. I had to play around. I had to make that fun, man.
Oh, it's very interesting that you've actually played the role, because we can talk about it until the cows come home, but your impersonation of it actually brings it to life.
Yeah, if it isn't a marriage thing, it's even like
friendship.
Right now, you're struggling financially, and I
Yeah.
know that you're not. Because how often do people struggle with money? How often do people struggle in their relationships? Or you don't believe in yourself, and you're depressed. You're struggling inside. God hears your voice. He knows your struggles, dude. I am one of the more optimistic people you'll ever meet. I'm very rarely depressed, but I have moments.
Of course. We all do.
But you go into that church and that music is going, brother. And let me tell you about it. It's like, okay. It's hypnosis in a way, but like it's really how they get you. And I think the message is like that.
It's funny that you sort of compared it to the act of a magician and an illusionist. And that's
because why did people think about it? Same psychological reasoning. Why do people go to Jonathan Edwards? They have a loved one they miss. They're hurt. They're broken. They're missing something. They're not complete. They didn't get to finish the conversation. So next thing you know, they're in there, and there's a Bobby, a B, Bobby, Billy, Bill, Bob, Brandon. And like keep going. Next thing you know, you're gonna find someone with a B, and they're like, he's coming through. And you're giving them what they want. They want you to tell you that marriage, that struggling marriage. Oh my God, that's me. You do care about me. You are thinking about what I can just start over. You've carried, like, this can all be forgiven. Like, screw having to work extra hard and making amends to my wife for treating her like shit. Jesus took it all. Now I could just turn to her and say, Jesus forgave me and Jesus forgave you. Let's just start over. Rather than we need to work through this in depth.
You can just say, and you can say, oh, you can just move on and bang that secretary of yours.
Oh man, there's all sorts of stuff you can come up with.
Here's another question and proposition for you. Do you think then it's not really about that faith in that God? I think that God is almost used as a bridge for humanity to reach heaven. And faith is not really, we don't think so much about faith in God, but it's mostly the rituals and the habits and the company of others, the consoling factors, the patting on the shoulder, saying it's going to be all right. It's the social aspects of the faith that keeps it together. What do you think?
I think so. I do. I think so. And I think that's why it works when you tell them stick around. Because when you feel something, if there's that placebo effect from the social environment, then it affirms that faith, I hope, and I believe, and I'm wishing, and I'm trying to hold on to idea. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that at the end of the day, the social environment plays as much of a role as the placebo effect that's given in the situation. And that's helping with the faith. That's helping them still believe. Like when the guy's going, someone in here, and they're going, is struggling with their marriage. What they're trying to tell you is that God is hearing you, and God knows right now the person in here that's struggling. Like almost like you feel like he's pointing his finger at you, and you think, this message for me. Mm-hmm. Then you go down and they pray for you. It's affirmation based on that placebo effect. It helps convince the person, just lay in wait and you'll get blessings income-wise if it's a struggle with money. Don't worry, you'll get through this little valley in your life that you're struggling with depression or whatever. And it gives them hope, which goes back to our definition of faith, something that you don't see the evidence of. My money isn't here. I'm broke now, Lord. I'm broke now. No evidence. Don't worry, you won't be broke for long. Keep believing. I felt you, Lord, on Sunday. I felt you, Jesus. And because I felt that, I believe. So I think the feelings that come with the environment and the faith in the faith help to affirm your faith. That's the way I took what you said and help people understand what I'm trying to get
So
at.
at least a lot of people, that there's that sort of, they worry about the congregation. It's the numbers game. They want the congregation to be big, and they want people to affirm their faith. So it's kind of genuine in a way, because if these people are true believers, then they really want to help people to reach the kingdom of heaven, and they don't want them to be tormented. So it's coming from a good place, but I might disagree that is wrong, but at least these people have good intentions. However, if let's switch to the evangelism and televangelists, the concept of a seed. I don't know if you heard of it.
Oh my gosh.
Pay $5 now, and it's come to you. Are these deliberate scammers? They gotta be.
I would say for the most part, yes. I don't know, but based on the people who've been caught before doing this nonsense, I mean, here we are with the pursuit of knowledge over faith, right? I don't have faith that these guys are scamming. There's good evidence to suggest that they are. So if there's some that aren't, they're sincere believers, let's say, and they're just really good at speaking, and they're promoting these ideas about Jesus and whatnot, that they're just getting blessed, that people are sending them money. Eventually, I imagine that money turns into a business. So now it's more about, how do I keep the bucks coming in? So I don't know, and I can't evaluate each situation, because I suspect each person is different. Is different on how we would analyze this. But for the most part, I would go out of my way to say most of these millionaire televangelists know what they're doing. And they have a self-help type model. But
I've seen shows where they have like a toll-free number and call in. And the theme of the episode would have been about the guy who's had a vision that he must have a private jet so he can spread the good news. And the seed, which is a concept of preying upon the poor people, because even the poor people are not immune. Even if you have $1, they want to take it off you, because that dollar is going to be $5,000 or whatever. So they don't care, even if that's probably your lost dollar or whatever. You don't have much of the currency you're given, but they don't care about that. They're going to take that away from you too.
Yeah, So to your question, I would say for the most part, I would say. I can't know that all of them are, but there's good reasons to say a lot of them are.
But one thing for sure, they're also very charismatic, and they put on a good show. These, their hair is nicely made, the jewelry, the suit is tailored, and there's some. It's a show that is going on.
Absolutely, it's a show, and whether you're watching it on TV or in person, God is speaking to you, don't you know? So it's a money business, man. There's a lot of money in it.
Right. So I think we set a kind of planned couple of hours. So we've got, guys, another 15 minutes or so to go if you have any more questions. But Derek and I were going to try to sort of sum this up together in terms of faith. Now, away from religion for a bit, we are in the 21st century, and we're trying to believe things on merits. Believe things because there's evidence for them. And the definition of epistemology is a justified true belief. Mm-hmm. So you got to believe in something. You got to have to be able to justify it, and you have to be able to validate it. It's true. It matches to reality. And faith is not. Maybe faith is a belief, and it might be justified because you have the justification for yourself to believe, but it's not true. Or at least we can show it's not true, or there's no evidence that it's true. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it's not knowledge.
Do you think experience plays a part of that? But go ahead.
True. In the 21st century, now the tools of epistemology, the tools of knowing and validating and how things are so easily accessible. Do you think there is any justification for, in this day and age, in 21st century, for people to believe in things without evidence?
I mean, well, it depends on who you're talking about, because this is the problem. I personally, you're asking me, right? You're asking me what I think. I think that, let me paint it in a delightful manner. Let me serve it to you back in a nice, peaceful, respectful manner, but it gets the point. We do not need God to be moral. We do not need God to be ethical, to be good people. Okay, I'm hitting the moral part. We don't need God to feel like we're not alone. We don't need God to not feel purpose. So you don't need God to have purpose. You don't need God to have ethics and morality. You don't need God for any of these things that when I was a believer, I thought I had to have God to have. Because what's the point? If I die and there's nothing there, well, what's the point? Because to me, this wasn't the point. The point was then. And there's a shift. So a lot of civilizations, a lot of places in the world are way behind in terms of this science that we're approaching the world at and trying to push the boundaries of ethics and our understanding using an epistemology that is science-based or that is trying to approach things from a naturalist worldview. How can we reduce harm, reduce suffering in the world for all people, no matter what your dogmas are? And so it's hard when we have a world full of so many ideas with so many different viewpoints and so many different people that aren't on board with this, that are still thinking gays are just wanting to sin and weren't born with this particular thing, or at some point in their life through their puberty process, certain genetic things or potential whatever in their life and in their bodies cause them to want to be drawn towards same sex, or people who are both, right? You have bi, right? You have people. My point is whatever it is, there's so many people with backwards ideas. And I personally think everyone can be educated to get out of these ideas over time. Some are not willing. Some are not willing. Some are afraid. Some don't know how, maybe. I'm even willing to grant that some just don't know how. I mean, we are animals. We have gotten to this point to pretend that everyone has the capability of breaking away from the dogmas that they were indoctrinated to have their whole lives. I don't know. It's not my experience. I'm capable mentally to go beyond that. I would love to see the world progressively head in that direction, to know that it's not necessary, because a lot of these religions do bring us back to tribalism, as if we're not one race of humans, and as if life itself isn't one life that we've all come from. The way we treat animals, the environment, we all come from the earth. So let's pretend that the science that we've learned, evolution, I'm going to paint it in a mythological sense. We need that to be our mythology. It will break all the walls of tribalism that we've built up down.
So you're saying we need to author a new story?
A new story that is based on the fact that we actually did evolve. Guts at Gibbons said it, Erica. She said it really, really wonderful. She goes, man, you think these stories in the Bible are pretty cool and like all these mythologies. She goes, if you heard the story of the underdog named the Homo sapien and how that underdog came to be the number one species on this planet, you would shit yourself. She said
the greatest story ever told.
The greatest story ever told. Better than dragons, better than floods, better than you name it. You can come up with all sorts of stuff. Because in reality, they literally did fight dragons, Komodo dragons, larger lizards at certain places. We were always an underdog living in the canopies of trees. And how we came from that to ruling the earth is a whole nother story. But will we be good carekeepers of the earth? This is the big thing. We haven't been doing so well. So I am optimistic that it can be done.
Do you know what? I think a book ought to be written about this, to take in the scientific narrative and put it into the stories that we love, the triumph of the underdog. That everybody loves the story about an underdog.
Right. But that's because I think the truth in these narratives is there's a pattern we find in stories that oftentimes matches reality from experience. So people who were underdogs historically actually become the ruler, or people who were weak and you didn't expect, boom, beat the person you didn't think was going to. And so underdog stories, it's because it's a shocking thing. And that has been evolution from day one. It broke through, it survived, it mutated. This is the point I'm trying to say, is the thing that changes is the most powerful and the most creative. And I think Christianity, for a long time, reason it succeeded is it was willing to change to its environment so well.
It looks like we like to learn as human species in form of stories, like the simulation hypothesis by Nick Bostrom, the philosopher. It's been there. People say, "Oh, that's wacky stuff." The Matrix comes out in the year early 2000, and the cult. It became a cult movie straight away. It's like, oh my god, that sounds very plausible because it's in a movie. Suddenly it's a story, and then it's been acted by people. It's like, shit, what if this is what's really happening? But I think we need to start writing some stories that reflect science, but in a story. That story of that Homo sapien, that 5-foot little creature that was struggling against animals and stronger creatures, and only he had a little bit of intelligence, some tool making, and a bit of collaboration, and that's it.
Right.
Imagine that story.
I mean, it's pretty nuts. I read a short history of life on Earth by, I've got to interview the guy too. I have forgot to email him back. Oh. He wrote a book that blew my mind from abiogenesis. Well, pretty much the start of the universe. He makes a brief thing till he gets to the first non-living organisms that are kind of like, or organism is a bad word because it's kind of a living thing, but like from non-life to life, and then going from there to everything that we find. Even just thinking of stuff like birds evolved from reptiles.
Oh yeah, chicken is a dinosaur. A chicken is
right, and we eat it. We eat dinosaurs every damn day. But lots of people eat chicken. Point is you finding this stuff out. It doesn't even sound in your mind when you're a Christian, when you're a young Earth creationist. You can't even imagine birds came from reptiles. What? Like, you don't know how the mutation process happens. And if we knew this, it's actually really fascinating to find out about evolution.
Oh, it's absolutely fascinating. And, I can't wait for that Darwin Day to have that conversation with Erica, Aaron, and Dave. But, the faith business is quite interesting. It's very emotional. And the thing is, I feel for people, because here's probably the last point that I'm going to try to make, and see if we can chat about this and sort of end the conversation here. Is
okay.
Faith is consoling. There are a lot of, you and I live in good countries. There's food, there's shelter, there's energy. Imagine, just by the sheer luck, you and I were in a country where the things that we take for granted were not readily available.
Right.
And you have to struggle for food and struggle for education, and everything is a burden, everything is a chore. Wouldn't take away the one thing that's probably consoling these people be quite harsh?
I would imagine, yeah. I mean, this is why in poverty type slave mentalities, things like that, Friedrich Nietzsche talks about how Christianity really, really succeeded in the empire. Most of the empire was run with slaves. I mean, if your ideology is perfectly hand in glove with slave mindset, and you're not the winner. In fact, the way that it was portrayed by Friedrich Nietzsche, and it was quite a brilliant assessment to see this. When you're trapped in a situation and you are completely helpless, if you can somehow turn that in your mind into a strength, your weakness is your strength. That is, again, remember, we talked from the beginning of the show. The little niece gets raped by the husband, or the uncle. I mean, she's pregnant, but she remembers an angel coming to her, doesn't remember any sex, because the mind is a powerful tool. The mind, I think, is a powerful tool in Christianity as well. Here are people who are actually powerless, They literally are powerless. They have no way of controlling the Roman Empire that they're involved in. They are stuck at the bottom of the totem pole. And here they are being given a strength. It is the meek who will inherit the world. It is the weak. It is the slave. It is the last who will be first. It is the weak who will be strong. Your strength is your weakness. And that ideology helps someone who's in the most worst, desperate situation in the world. And I think that's why people get the Jesus message and it grabs them. Are you struggling? Is your life falling apart? The Lord also lived and went through the same thing, and you can overcome with mansions of gold and streets of diamonds, with goodness and peace and love, and no more hate, no more, like, that's beautiful. I wish that were the case. I really do. But it's like, because we've all struggled, I think it's the perfect message for those who can't control the world they're in.
Derek,
accept it.
That comes from a lovely, compassionate place, but picked up by the right people. And that slave morality proposed by Nietzsche could be the tool. Imagine the Roman Empire, one Messiah after the other, being executed because they want to free themselves from the Roman occupation. Mm-hmm. And there comes a Messiah that his kingdom is not of this world, and say, bingo, we're going to keep this one. Here's your Messiah.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, because they're not going to revolt anymore, and as a matter of fact, we will eventually adopt this interesting idea because it seems to be a tool to keep people in check.
It does.
It's a slave morality. You want to be subdued and submitted. We want to rule an empire, and using this particular tool, we'll make sure that everybody is, conforming with the rules.
Well, yeah, I think that this brings the point I was saying earlier about the strongest thing. We talked about, in the Christian message, the weakest is the strongest. You literally accept the weakness and accept this world is nothing. Forsake this and you'll have a life after. If you hold this life, you lose the life after. If you cherish this life, you lose. This is literally messages the gospel presents as if Jesus is saying. Whether he did or didn't, don't know. But at the end of the day, Christianity is mutation. It literally is like humans, where we evolved and we mutated to our environment. Cold, hot, bad situations. It's a mutation in a certain situation. So what happens when the empire becomes Christian? And let's just say there isn't the same situation that they were in before. Christianity adapts to it. What happens when Muslims start to conquer and go on their conquest? You know what? We found a way to pick up a sword and fight war. We now know how to fight in the name of Jesus, which Constantine did as well. But my point is political power, Christianity adapts this whole thing. And so it can mutate to its environment. This is why you find people who are money grabbing. Jesus wants you to be rich on TV, and people who can say at the same time, Jesus said, sell everything that you own and follow me. Well, how come the money preacher who says you need to be blessed and have blessings and get riches and get glory and all this stuff can still say they're Christian and talk as if they're Christians in the same community, and then have the same people over here who are preaching a Jesus message saying, humble yourself, sell all that you own, and come and follow Jesus? That's the message. Go and become a martyr. And then others are saying, go and become a politician and literally make a change and make Christianity like, what the hell happened here? It mutates. The message mutates, and people can adapt it in whatever that environment is. So I just think that you find various forms of it. And really, is it really Christianity at the end of the day? They talk and they use the words and they say it, but it's like, I don't know if it is anymore. It's there's so much baggage of different things that are being mixed in.
For some reason, I don't think we're going to see the back of this faith business for quite some time. I think the way we have evolved, it's going to allow faith to come in different shapes and forms. But as long as the situation is balanced, and there are a few of us who would, use other tools of epistemology to reach conclusions, and those who are faithful to an idea, don't want to inflict harm on others on the back of that faith, I think we're okay for now. Folks, this is MythVision. I'm sure a lot of you have come and followed Derek, but for those who subscribe to Critical Faculty and don't know Derek very much, he's only 300 to go to get to that 70,000 subscribers. So you know what to do.
70,000. It's coming, man. We're going to get 100K no time, and we're going to keep on busting through and educating people. So glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to share with you guys as well. Derek's Patreon page.
Thanks, man.
I've got it open here because there's a lot of contents, and it's very reasonably priced. But there's a lot of contents, a lot of scholarly contents that you create. So it's almost like an educational program there you're running.
Yeah. So there's tons of content. A lot of it is I'll find a way to put it out early on Patreon, and then I'll launch it public. But a lot of it's still on the Patreon. And so there's a lot of content there. I'm also doing things where people who support me, you could join as little as $3 a month, and you literally access everything. But people, I believe in the kindness of humans. And I know that there are people who can help more than that. This is literally funded by the audience. If it weren't for Patreon, MythVision, I'd do this part-time because I love doing it, but I wouldn't be able to do it full-time. And if it weren't for my Patreon, I wouldn't be able to do this. But the questions that I ask of these academics, like lately, I've been picking back up on, hey, this scholar's coming over, we're doing courses, and I'm doing Patreon questions. So if you're a Patreon member, you can ask one question each. I try to limit it to one question each per scholar for Patreon members because I'm interviewing in 4K. Then I have to edit all this stuff. But, you can't beat it. I don't know anyone else who does a Patreon who literally whips out 4K cameras, sets it up in like an amazing setting. The quality is impeccable. Asking the academics your question. And then once I get time, edit it, put it up on Patreon. Eventually it makes it to the public eye. And you can brag about it down the road and say, I made history. Look at this question I got to ask this Harvard or this Oxford or this Princeton or this Yale or this whatever scholar. Look at them. They are literally addressing my question. And
to be honest with you, I kept thinking about it the other day, to go and see these celebrity sort of thinkers speaking in Australia, like Richard Dawkins is coming to Melbourne very soon.
Wow.
And I was looking at the tickets, about $300-400 to get a ticket in a decent place. And the ability to bring these speakers to the bedrooms and the lounges of people at home, and the ability to interact directly with these,
right,
just for the price of a cup of coffee, everybody's a winner. It's a great proposition for people to be able to access.
Yeah. And you know what my fear is eventually we'll have so many people wanting to jump on that question ordeal that I'll get too many questions, and then I won't have the time with the academic to try and get all their questions and stuff. Eventually, I imagine, but I'd rather complain about that and say, I'm so sorry I couldn't get your question this round, but I've got another scholar coming next time, and this is their expertise, than be struggling to get people to make this thing possible. So,
Agreed. And it's a good time that people are spending time being interested in topics like this, and it means that we are in an enlightenment sort of period where people are so inquisitive and so curious about what's true and what's not. That's brilliant. Derek, I'm very proud to have you as a friend. You're very entertaining as well as informative, because that voice that you put on a microphone today of somebody in a church who's trying to play that game was quite interesting. I'll remember this for quite some time. I have to take a snippet of it. But
there's a person in this bedroom right now, in this room. Blessings will come upon him. I can feel it. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, I know. That's how they make all their money. I should start that way. Welcome to MythVision. There's somebody in the audience. Somebody out there. Right now.
Call it. Put on the super chat voice.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen. No, what we need to do is put the little music in the background, subtle. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm struggling. The struggle is so bad. And if you blessed me, you would be blessed back tenfold. God's blessings will rain down on you from heaven. You know, they do all that stuff. So
thank you so much, Derek. All right. Thank you, folks. Coming next month, I've got Lawrence Krauss coming again. I've got the evolution conversation with Aaron Rand. I've got Dan Barker coming. I've got a few conversations lined up apart from my Arabic contents as well that I'm going to be trying to do over the weekend. I've got a full-time job, so wow. I can only do this over the weekend.
Hanny, I'm proud of you too, man. You're doing such great stuff. And those science talks and everything that you're doing, I watch those when I'm doing something and I'm busy doing something and I can listen while I'm working on something. I'm listening to them and I'm like, I was blown away by your last Guts at Gibbon one. You guys went into some like mutation stuff. Dude, that last interview you did with her was amazing. Like she's the kind of person you just wind up and then you just let go. And it's like, well, let me tell you, the cranium and and it's like, oh, she's the best. She's
bundle
the
of energy. I love people who are so enthusiastic about what they do like that. It's very cheer. It makes me really happy to see people so passionate about what they do. And that's one thing about you, Derek, as well. You display that. You know, it's almost your full-time job now.
It is,
but you don't turn up kind of all mundane. You know, it's another day. Every day I see you having a conversation. Your eyes as bright and as open as a little child in a candy shop, just listening to the information coming in. And I think that's never going to fade away. And people can see that, by the way.
Yeah, that's because, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, folks. So I'm going to leave you now with the new outro of the new channel. Now, by the way, new channel logo, new channel, everything. We've rebranded after a couple of years. So hopefully you enjoyed the conversation. And Derek and I will see you very soon later.
Until next time.